YouTube, Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotors on a 2015 Toyota Rav4 XLE. And this is the all-wheel drive. Toyota made this vehicle with two different sizes of brake rotors, 275mm or the 296. Now, when I went to buy these at my local O'Reilly, they asked whether it was made in Japan or not. This vehicle is actually made in Canada, but it does come with the larger rotors. These are 296mm or 11.65 inches. The 275 or 10.8 inches. According to O'Reilly, they said those are on vehicles made in Canada or China, and the 296 came in all vehicles made in Japan. But in this case, this is made in Canada, but I believe because it's the XLE or the all-wheel drive, it does come with the larger rotor. So just make sure that you get the right parts before you start this job. And the easiest way to do that is take off the front wheel and just measure the diameter so you know which one to get. Now, the first thing I like to do before taking this caliper off is push the caliper piston back. Basically, I'm going to be pushing that piston back inside the caliper, pushing the fluid backwards up into the master cylinder. So it's a good idea before we do this to double check the master cylinder and make sure there's enough room so that when we push that fluid backwards, we're not going to overflow it and make a big mess. Now, before we push the caliper piston back in, it's a good idea to pop the hood. Take a look at your master cylinder reservoir here. You can see down below our fluid level is well below the max, and we have plenty of room to push the fluid backwards up into here without it overflowing and making a mess. A lot of people ask me if you need to take this lid off in order to do that. You really don't. The resistance in the caliper piston doesn't seem to change whether I take that off or leave it on. Brake fluid absorbs moisture, even moisture in the air, and as little as you can expose it to new air, the better. Exposing it to more air and moisture will cause it to degrade and go bad. So I'm going to leave that on while we push the caliper piston back in. The other way you could do this is you could also just open this bleeder screw right here, and as you push that in, the old fluid will come out here. That's not a bad way to cycle through your brake fluid as well. Now that we know we have enough room, we can go ahead and push this back in. So I'm just going to get a flathead screwdriver in here, and I'm just trying to catch the edge of the pad. So we're just wedging this in between the pad and the rotor. It's okay if you tap it in a little bit. In our case, we're replacing both the pads and the rotor, so we don't care if we cause any damage to the old pad, of course. This is a pry bar I've been using lately. I like this little Dominator by Mayhew. It's a straight, short pry bar, but it gives you a lot more leverage. And you see how quickly that just pushes that caliper piston back in. And you can see now we've got a lot more room inside there for the new, thicker pad material. You can also shift over to this side and just make sure that we get that caliper piston pushed all the way back in. All right, now we need to loosen and remove these two caliper slide pin bolts. Those are a 14mm. Now sometimes they'll spin, so you can get an open end wrench and put it on here. I believe it was a 17mm, but sometimes this will come off easily with the impact. There we go. Hang on to those. And then when we take this caliper off, I like to use these little caliper hooks or caliper hanger hooks. Just put that up here on the coil spring, up and out of the way. You just don't want to let that dangle or drop from the brake line. Now we can pull out the old pads. Now you can see this one has some weird scoring here on the surface. Some pitting and some scoring. We had the same issue on the other side as well. I don't know if something got in there or wedged up in there, but it definitely was making some noise, and that's why we're swapping out both the pads and the rotor. This one's not so bad. That's just some damage from where I was prying, but this one didn't look as bad on the surface. And they're not completely worn down, but we'll get these all swapped out. I'm gonna see if I can put this up a little bit higher. Yep. All right, now we need to take off and remove these two larger bolts. These are 17mm, and that's so we can remove this caliper support bracket. I'm just gonna use this little mid-torque Milwaukee. This is the 2960 with a 17mm socket. And then we'll just take that bracket off. Just helps to have one hand on this so it doesn't fall. All right, now sometimes the rotor will just come right off, and sometimes they're stuck on there pretty good. A lot of times they'll just kind of seize to the hub right here, especially if you live in a rusty area. This vehicle actually did spend a lot of time up in Utah, and you can see we've got a lot of rust here. So this is not going to come off very easily, but there is a special tool here called the Rotor Remover 9000. Just got to give it a few whacks here. It's also called the Tanya Harding. Now, if that doesn't work, you can see right here that there's these two threaded holes, and you can grab a bolt. You just turn that in, and that will almost act like a press and push that rotor off of the hub. But usually the sledgehammer will get it, so let's just give it a try here. There we go. Now before I put the new rotor on the hub here, I'm gonna clean all this rusty surface off here with just a little wire brush. Just make sure you wear some safety glasses if you're gonna do this. This will prevent that rotor from getting stuck on here again. Okay, that's good enough. I'm just gonna brush this with a little bit of this Permatex Anti-Seize, and that little bit goes a long way. Don't overdo it. Mostly this little shoulder right here is where I'm concerned about. Just kind of spread that around, and that will prevent that new rotor from sticking on there. Okay, I think my camera cut out here, but I just kind of brushed this hub with a wire brush and then just coated it with a little bit of this Anti-Seize to prevent the new rotor from sticking. And then we just cleaned off the rotor here with some brake clean. All right, now this bracket here, we need to get this all cleaned up. We're gonna put on new hardware, and we're also gonna take out and re-grease these slide pins. We'll do the slide pins first. So just kind of pull back on the rubber boot and just slide these out. Now these weren't too bad. They weren't as bad as that 2018, but they're a little sticky, a little gummy. So I'm just gonna kind of put this in here a little bit more. Just try to clean out a little bit of that excess grease. And then this is the grease I'm using here, this VersaChem synthetic caliper grease, which is great for these slide pins. It's this nice pretty blue color. And then we'll pop that back in and just kind of push it until the rubber part pops up onto that shoulder and spin that. Make sure it spins nice and free. By comparison, you see here's this one. It's just a lot stiffer. So we'll take that out. This one, I believe, has the little rubber boot or rubber ring on the end of it, and it looks like it's kind of hanging up here a little bit. See this little rubber ring? Sometimes those swell, but I think this one will still be okay. But if they swell, if somebody uses the wrong kind of grease, you're going to need to get some replacements. Yeah, this one's still going to be okay. Little tight, but I think it'll be all right. Maybe next time we do the brakes on this vehicle, we'll get some new little slide pin bushings there. I think this will work just fine. Nice little coat of grease there. If you put too much grease in there, because it doesn't compress, it's going to pop the slide pin out and it'll cause your brakes to drag. So just make sure that that will go in. Pop the little boot up there and kind of squeeze that and burp any air out. And just make sure that it moves freely. That feels perfect. Slide pins are good. All right, now we're going to pop out the abutment clips, these little pad retainer clips. Now the important thing on this is this part right here. We do need to clean out these little channels or these little recesses where those clips will fit. You really need to get those clips sitting flush. You can see we have a little bit of buildup of rust here. And what happens is that pushes the clips up, and that will also cause your brakes to drag. Just remember to wear some safety glasses if you're going to use a wire wheel. Now to prevent any future rust in this little area here, I am going to also brush just a little bit of that caliper grease in here. Not so much of a lubricant, but a protectant here with this, just to prevent the rust from building up underneath here and pushing those brake pads up and binding. Now it's pretty straightforward on these clips. They just line them up. Just need to make them so that they have this little part angled outward and the little flap right here goes over the back. And then just, again, make sure that those are pressed all the way down. Okay, got them all. Now before I put the caliper bracket up, I'm going to put a little bit of thread lock on the two bolts that hold that in place. This is just the medium strength blue. I'll get a link to this in the description. It doesn't take much. And then just kind of roll that around the bolt and that'll be fine. And then we'll just put that bracket right up here, get those started. Just zip those on real quick. This is the gear wrench 85062 torque wrench that I'm using. Let's get these torqued to 72 foot-pounds. All right, now on these new pads, you'll notice they don't come with these clips attached. So we just need to clip those in place. And I'm just putting them on the same way that the pads that were on here, they had them on the top. So before I put this on, I also like to put just a little coat of this grease on the back and a little bit at the top and the end here. That just seems to help keep it quiet. And just kind of put these in at a little bit of an angle. These are a little tricky because of those springs, those spring-loaded clips. But if we can just get past that little edge there. So I struggled a little bit with the other side, but let's see if we can get this one here. There we go. That one's kind of a pain. I gotta tell you, these springs are just really tight. Feels like a lot of interference there, but once you get that angled, you'll get it. Let's put them here on the top here on this side, inside pad. And again, just another little light coat of this brake grease on the back to help eliminate some of those vibrations and whatnot that cause noise. Just remember to not get any grease or anything on the surface of the pad, the friction surface here, or on the rotor itself. But same thing, we'll just put this one in, just kind of at an angle. Come on. There we go. Got it. Now these are definitely tricky to get in. You do just have to angle it and push, but just make sure that those brake pad retainer clips or the abutment clips are pressed inside those channels and completely flush, or you'll have a hard time getting these pads on. All right, now we can put the caliper on. Let's take this hook off. Before I put the caliper on, I'm just gonna brush this off as well. We got a lot of rust on here. Just be careful on the rubber boot there. Make sure that that doesn't get damaged. And I'm also gonna just put just a little bit of this brake grease here. Now we don't wanna use a lot here because even on the outside of the edge of the pads, that'll just pick up a lot of dust. But just that thin little coating, not only does it protect the metal, but it will also help dampen some of the vibrations there. But when we put this on, you might have to pull a little bit on the slide pins to get that to line up. And then we can put in our two little slide pin bolts. Just kind of have to pull up a little bit on the caliper to line that up. And we'll just zip these on real quick. Now the torque spec on these little slide pin bolts is 25 foot-pounds. Now you see when I go to tighten that, it spins the slide pin because now it's nice and clean and greased. So what we can do is just grab a 17mm open-end wrench. This is a thin profile wrench. You might be able to get a standard one on here, but sometimes you need to grind it thin. But that will prevent the slide pin from spinning. So you can hold that and torque these to 25 foot-pounds. Same thing, you see how that slide pin just spins? We're gonna hold that with that wrench. And you're done. Quick and easy job. Now it's very important before you drive away to step on the brake pedal several times, which will push the caliper piston back out, pressing those pads up against the rotor where they need to be. When you do that, however, only step halfway down on the brake pedal until it feels firm. If you press the brake pedal all the way to the floor, you can damage the seals in your master cylinder. And just remember to top off your master cylinder and make sure that that's at the appropriate level before you head out. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description to some of the parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.